now hand over to staff. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillors, the second workshop, the other one on Monday is a continuation of it. Peter will guide us through it, and then we go through the CD questions, set it up, and deliverability, and then the governance.
Sorry,
Speak up, got a bit of a red.
that's sort of like air conditioning thing going here.
That's good. Good for me, telling people to speak up.
Today we're really dealing with the questions arising from the consultation document. So we're looking at the core part of the annual plan. Recall that you asked for an annual plan, a light annual plan. That's what we're delivering here today. So the feedback we've had from the community on the CD questions was given to you through Amy's thematic analysis. We're now looking for guidance today on both the CD questions, the capital deliverability replacement proposal, overall discussion on the rate level of rates. So that's the purpose of today. And I'm waiting for the clicker to come through. Don't know what happened then. Right, there'll also be a little section at the end where we can talk about amendments as well. Right, there's a very slow response time on this. Sam, would it work better if I simply said next slide?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we just go back one slide, please? Yeah. Okay. Two streams here. One is the annual plan itself, which is the feedback on the questions we consulted on, guidance on financials, and the capital deliverability proposal. The second stream is the amendments. We just need to keep them as two separate streams of discussion. Moving forward, please. The amendments process, I think you all know this, but it's just really a bit of housekeeping. The amendments will be proposed on the day, and with the seconder. There does need to be a clear link to the consultation feedback that we've received, remembering that the purpose of the annual plan is to transparent changes to the LTP, to obtain feedback to the material, which we are doing, and then to discuss the community feedback for any changes to the annual plan. We are looking for your questions on or before the 27th, so we've got a chance to provide advice before the documents need to be prepared for audit and risk at council. Okay, and of course amendments are voted upon on the day, which is the 24th of June. But this is the 13th of June. Okay, so moving forward, please. As I said, Amy, just to keep moving forward, Amy provided you with the analysis of feedback from the community. In this case, there's a very strong indication of feedback from the community around the cathedral. We are now looking for your guidance on that in order to build the final annual plan document. What to do with this CD question? I think we need to tackle them one at a time, rather than go through the one.
Okay, so the cathedral one first,
please.
I think it's fairly clear what the people are after. Just to give guidance to Peter, is everyone happy to be happy with what the people are after? Victoria?
It was clarification there that the collection of it is paused, but the funds that have been collected are ring-fenced and invested.
Yep, through your worship, correct.
Okay, all good. So we're all quite good. No one else. Okay. Next one, please. That's good.
Next one, please. Air Force Museum. Again, there's a fairly significant drift here in terms of the feedback. And we'd like your advice on what to do with this proposal.
Yes, Sarah.
It's 2 months of this, and then we didn't make clear that the $5 million grant, because it's
a capital will be paid back over 30 years, and it's going to cost twice that to ratepayers over time. So we should be at the shorter on rates to start with. But once we pay back the loan, it'll be about 10. And the other thing is we asked that question, and then a month later, the government came out with a proposal to give the Defence Force the additional $12 billion. And so I'm wondering if the feedback might have been different, if people had known that the Defence Force was going to be more well equipped to be able to support this rather than ratepayers. Have any views on those?
Something happened after the proposal went out, but really this is a matter of debate for councillors now, based on the feedback we've had and the questions you posed. We're looking for councillors to have a discussion. Yeah. It isn't really a staff centre kind of moment.
I mean, that would be my two concerns with this one.
Celeste?
Yeah. Normally, whether there'll be any contribution towards this. As part of that, just like $12 billion or something.
I don't know the answer to that.
And is that something we should be considering? Oh, sorry. So I was just curious as whether we're looking to submit a formal request for a contribution from the government out of that.
It's contingent on government.
So to cover the.
This is contingent on providing the government, the Crown also, how much?
Total bill is about 15 million.
So it is contingent, otherwise we wouldn't put it out unless there was a matching at least. It's a decision that you could
make. There wasn't an proposal, but we could make that.
Sure. Yeah.
Because $5 billion is not going to build the thing.
So just to be clear, will we ask that question if we haven't already before we make that decision, rather than the sort of stadium scenario where we're trying to do things retrospectively? It seems to work.
Yeah, consultation again for the sentence thing, but you could, you've got the choice of making the decision as a proposal, adapting it and making it contingent, or defer it and effective. So those are, you have other options, but those are 3 years.
Yeah, John, Andrew, did you have questions?
Please do, you talking about asking Defence Force.
Yeah, exactly. So it's about getting a full response from the government. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Air Force Museum consultant, because that because we put out the consultation. So I think that we should be asking a question too, because we've got a third ground to make a decision. And it just seems to be changing out.
It's our funding that will be put
Yeah,
in.
there's no question about that.
It's the permission to ask the government to make a contribution. That was your
Well, I think we should be asking the Air Force Museum what was their original plan, because if we're looking at a $15 million building, we're only putting $5 million in grant. What was the plan? Because that information could be
Yeah, mate.
Yeah, so to give a bit of context on this being on the Air Force Museum board, we are in discussions with the government at ministerial levels. Suggested that talking to the Air Force Museum would be taken together. Outlining the trust for at the museum, it's the right there, but it's a seat to help show the city museum, and then we'll have other ones to the table.
Sort of a backup sort of thing.
No, it's a kickstart.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, Andrew, do you have your hand up or you were just? It's been there, done that. Right. Sam?
Yeah, so on the Air Force Museum, I got some feedback is supporting of it, which you probably expect you're going to ask something like this, but can you just clarify for me the resolution or the proposal? I thought it was to be contingent on government funding. So I thought we wouldn't give it until
Yeah.
Because that was the intent at the time. Is we wouldn't just give them $5 million. It would be contingent on the other parties, a bit like we're talking about the museum. So can someone just clarify that? So can we check that? Because it was yes, correct. Yeah, because then the second point is the rate will impact if the government don't move in the next year. Am I right in thinking that will just effectively push the rate impact?
Here's the answer.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. So in the consultation document, we said the grant would be conditional on the Air Force Museum confirming it has secured sufficient funding for the whole project prior to drawing down. And the business case showing how the museum will benefit the community and be financially sustainable. So that was in the CD.
So that was a
Yes, it was.
We just need to add in there, just saying grant, government. Because I guess the risk is like I think it makes sense for people to see we should do it. But I think the risk is if we tell them 5 and they say it's another 10 million, they go, oh, we can raise that, don't worry. Then they don't. So and then it'd be like a museum to win it.
trade before.
Yeah. But I think if we just maybe just put in, my preference would be to put in there that there needs to be some government contribution, which could be the Defence Force through their funding. But I'm pretty sure Brett mentioned there were some different funds, was probably funded an actual trip.
They got, it's not, they got all of it.
Can we change it? Because it's already on our stocks and jobs.
That's what I'm trying to ask. Yeah, if I could just ask.
Funding, it doesn't matter where it comes
That's right.
As long as someone comes up with the funding, we have to throw it in. Puts in. Sorry, hang on, Sarah. Doctor.
Question for Mark. What are the implications if this decision was deferred?
I don't believe it would be the end of the world, but it would be nice, I think, for show that on those grounds, shown consultation document, we're prepared to be at the table, to be a partner.
I'm thinking could
kickstart.
Sure.
I mean, mine's a follow up to that one, in that it does seem that because the Defence Force will have money, the thing is, if we say yes, absolutely, we'll go up to 5 million, then they are not incentivised to give a larger contribution than they might otherwise. So I think that deferring it for a year, saying that we are interested, but we're going to need some more conversation over the next year, and we'll make a decision in the next annual plan, especially when it's they're saying it'd be nice to have a contribution. What they were saying to us in the presentation, it sounded like it would go ahead anyway. And I know when we have conversations around the table for some quite small amounts, various grants that we give, and we argue over $20,000, and we say, well, will they go ahead anyway? That kind of thing. It seems to me that if we're talking about $5 million ratepayers money, if it's something that would go ahead anyway, sure, it would be nice to say we give their contribution. But we argue over 20,000 principle. And I think that we need a bit more surety that actually need it before we fully commit.
Sure. I'd be keen for us to progress into that contingent on that, like the consultant given. 500 people have come back and said they're keen on it. But because I think the other thing that we did talk about was that it's a unique situation given that if the government or whoever was the building, it's one of those weird ones where the government actually rates on it as well. So there's that wider benefit of we're contributing. Hopefully it's not that amount, but it's over. And I, personally, I don't think there'll be any rate of impact 26, 27. I don't think they'll have it sorted by then. But we just need to, it's a weird one because there is a contribution to the city in terms of government directly paying more rates to the city.
Yeah, just a question for Mark. Just from my information, we haven't and don't contribute anything to the building of it, the running of it, the maintenance of it. So, and it is I think people will agree that it's an absolute gem to have for Christchurch. So the least I feel, but I understand that it needs to have something in there contingent that it ties it down, so we don't just throw money away and end up down the bunny hole of another we've got. So Sarah, yeah.
I guess the last bit of that then is the decision making. If we did this and made it contingent on the two things we voted on, making sure that the rest of the money is secured, and that the business case stacks up, does that mean it then comes back to a council meeting for sign off so that we are sure of those things? Or is it a process where staff just go, oh, yeah, this case stacks up? Because in previous ones, so like other people are the release of the grant has come to council for decision, and that's been smaller amounts. I think it probably should come to council.
However, counter to that, I would feel comfortable that if we had the parameters in place and the milestones that they had to tick off, there's no need for it to come back to council. And staff could easily. I just think we shouldn't have things coming here that we don't need to. If we've got conditions that they have to meet, they meet them.
If you meet all the seconds, it would come to council, and I don't see a reason why it wouldn't happen if that take up to that sort of thing.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I think staff
to the new draft for next week, and we'll come back with some specifics on the wording and the what have you to. So today we're trying to get an indication so we can run the financials and we build the financials.
So we're all leaning in the direction of what people want. As long as there's a few provisos on how to tidy it up.
Sure.
And we'll get some wording to bring back for the actual resolution, but we're getting a general feel from the table to bake it in for this. Majority of
So you may have covered this, but I just wanted to check. Like my understanding is that they actually give us a lot of stuff that they don't charge, like storage of things that you guys talked about. That.
Yeah, it was alluding to the fact that the museum does give a lot of other benefits to the city in the way of storing goods for Canterbury Museum, Littleton Museum, and a number of other institutions around the city, free of charge. So. And
it is a venue for sort of tahi. They go there and do food and make a few pop. So it's hand and glove stuff. It's very good.
I wondered about this. Is there any work happening with Christchurch and Z around potential future development of that thing around aeronautics?
they're working with them.
So apparently,
so that's a different issue outside it. You've got to match that. So we'll note that and come back.
I thought there was work on some sort of aeronautical strategy that would probably talk about some sort of facilities that are useful for that industry. And I thought the place to do something that you would have money to the Airports Museum would be in that location because of its runway and its capability. So, yeah.
They're all working together, Yanni.
So, so the next one, please, Pete.
Please, Sam. Sources. Now there have been some additional bits of information. Would you like me to speak to, or you?
Very briefly, thank you, Peter. Your work's been councillors and not wanting to part the parcel here, but John may be able to elaborate. There may be some issues, I think, in terms of he can consent an agreement to this proposal. So you can do the study, but whether you could then implement it if you were minded to, there's additional steps to go through. So that's really one of the issues I think that needs to be addressed or table part of your deliberations.
Yeah, just confirming what Pete said, it needs Environment Canterbury's endorsement regardless of what approach we take. So, because of changes to the Land Transport Act in 2023.
Sarah, then
so from the information that we've had through already in the memo, whatever it was, that's because there's potential that it's seen as a public transport service because it will be run by council and be a shuttle service. Do other shuttle services that operate in the city, so the airport shuttle, those kind of ones, need a special exemption from ECAN to operate?
That's my understanding. I don't know about the airport one.
Because if we're just doing a shuttle that goes around the city, much like, there's the airport shuttle or there's the rail shuttle, those kind of things. It's not necessarily public transport.
Yeah, the license, they have to be registered through the regional council.
Yeah.
I don't know about the airport one specifically.
Yeah, if we could get some more information on whether other shuttle services within the city need dispensation from ECAN or not, that would be really useful, I think.
Yes,
Thanks.
we could do that.
Holly?
Yeah, look, this has got overwhelming support from the people of Christchurch, and there's only one person that I've spoken to, that was Annabelle, that came to council, that was a little bit reluctant. The way I see it is that if we were to seek endorsement from Environment Canterbury, we would still need to do this work prior to asking that. So I'm really keen to progress this to the point that we don't do the investigation. People are really asking us to do it. And I think there might be challenges to overcome, but that's what they are, challenges to overcome. I'm sure we can. So I'd be very supportive of progressing this.
Could we ask ECAN their opinion on this? So if we knew that they were going to support it or not support it, would be a really good way forward, because hopefully our friends at ECAN have vision to see that this is actually a positive. And if they don't, I think that's another conversation we have to have with them about the future of the city and the bus exchange and their ownership of it.
Hey, remember, hey, can I go?
Jake.
Hey, remember when ECAN came and presented, Joe Davies said that they would sign this off. So we have had a positive indication from at least the elected part of ECAN thus far.
The submission that they.
I'm talking about the oral though, John. The oral submission.
Yeah. And I appreciate the oral. I was just looking at the written submission that they put in was mixed feedback, raising another number of concerns, but it didn't say it opposed or supported.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shane. Tim? I'm sorry. Andre?
Yeah, look, just on the precedent that this might set, like, can council now start scoping studies for other areas that don't have bus routes? I don't know any one. There's plenty of areas around Hallsville. Can we start scoping out other bus routes?
Let's focus on this and then ask those questions, because it's a valid question.
This is just going to be something we had pre-quake.
Now's as good a time as any to ask. Yeah, it's pre-quake, but I mean, people then start coming to us for other bus routes that don't have bus routes. There's like 100 bus routes in the city. So
Sorted on.
This is about city shut.
But if we go forth with this,
Then your plan.
I understand that, yeah.
So it's everything, right? And service.
The future PT project was supposed to do all that, but we don't know exactly what we've lost the money.
This is your question. It's your time to go for you.
We have no idea. I don't even know if it's going to national ticketing, because if they had national ticketing, that's when people would tap off. So you could do
this is the shuttle that we're talking about.
But the submissions, people were saying, we don't think you should spend 200k on a strategy, spend the money on actually doing something. We've done numerous scoping studies on the yellow shuttle. We've had future PT that was supposed to look at it, or ECAN was supposed to look at it through whatever Greater Christchurch partnership process. I'd rather see the money going into a service rather than on consultants telling us what we already know. And if you look at the map that ECAN provided, there are like hundreds and hundreds of buses going in this area on this route. And when we had the yellow shuttle before, there weren't. And the key concern last time was that ECAN would always stop us having this yellow shuttle going east-west because it competed with existing bus routes, which should actually be going to the people that probably needed it most in terms of using it as a practical option within the four apps, right? So I just wonder, like, do we really know with ECAN around what the strategy is around the future of public transport in our city? When will we get that clarity? Because I'm completely confused around the future PT, like Conrad said. We were supposed to have bus routes in Maimati and Arrowhead. We were promised when they cut the bus services. So if we need to talk to
this is about the shuttle. Okay,
talking to ECAN about getting approval, right? Because I've been here when they've refused to let us extend it east-west. So we need a process around talking to ECAN around.
Okay, no worries. This is about shuttle, and you're getting off the board.
ECAN have to give consent for the shuttle, am I correct?
Yes.
So we need to talk to ECAN and we need to have a clear process.
Yes.
What we're going to fund here?
Okay, Sam?
It was just around the quantum. So, do we know if we did any? Have we done any work on whether it's actually 200 grand that's required?
Isn't it up to?
I was hearing numbers of about hundreds.
So it-
Yes, that's right. We
Is-
have done some work.
So, could we just have something come back with it?
Flavour, do you want to, at this stage for today, back or add the money in, and then it would come back with a more what the scope of this?
Take it in, but hopefully it'll be cheaper.
To not make it up.
My preference would be to get the actual number we need.
This is just we hire full-time for a year, a traffic engineer to look at this and other.
Sam, do you want to support it now and then get a more accurate figure? Sign off.
It's right for
Yeah, the one thing, I look at things a bit differently and I see $200,000 and I go, oh. So I ring up the man who sells brand new buses and you can buy a 25-seat bus for 185 grand plus TST. So my thought was, don't spend 200 grand and go buy one bus and buy two because we know we need some. But we need to go through this sort of this report business case to sort out any issues we might have with ECAN or do things, see where it would run, see what it would do. As I say, I'd rather spend the money on a bus like Yanni said, because we know we need it, but I think it's important we need to do it. Yeah, but we need to know more about it before we make this jump. So I'm happy to, if it's 160 or 200 grand, I'm happy to put it in
the actual number.
So shall we, for today, we'll sort some money in and let's try and get it.
Yeah.
Can I just check? We have like.
Well, we won't become a little picture. That's cool. Next one is to understand accounting.
We get the number into the report and spend up on the 24th of June. At that point, you'll decide the exact number. Is that right?
Yeah, you're coming back with what we think will be the exact number.
Okay. Second, there are two issues to consider here. They're both technically very different in content, but they both are in rates. So we put these two slides together so you get a sense of what the combined decision might look like. So I'll refer to Bruce here. One is on digital software, the other one is on rating for you.
Post-struct relates to digital software costs, both internal staff costs and external contractor costs, basically profit with books. And that has a funding impact. Borrow from CapEx largely, and it effectively moves into rating for OPEX. You can see on the slide there, we've got an option that we've moved to rate for it directly. We're looking at a 2% open start devices. We don't think it's material and it's consumption as part of the trial. The option which is to place that it's not using things to be consistent. So we're looking for guidance here.
Okay, but
It's automatic. I just wanted to know, like, it's the cheapest option overall would be the top one to rate directly. I imagine now, like, we consider council's finances indefinitely.
That would be the cheapest option. It's always cheaper too.
And are there other options for looking to be rating it quicker than by 2032? Because we know how we end up putting these things out. Could it be done over, say, 3 years? And what would that look like? So what I'm saying is, are there more options we can look at, please?
We're obviously conscious of the significant rates increase in the 26-27 year, which was something something that would sheet out to I guess lessen the impact of the following year. Having nothing in next year would be better for 26-27. So I think this is a reasonable approach, but it's open for discussion.
Hey, thanks, Liz. So just a couple of things. So what we're saying is that we wouldn't jump to the first one because we haven't consulted, well, it's hugely material issue consultant on. Which I guess makes sense. I guess just at a high level, so effectively what we're saying is that there's the treatment, the way we've been treating it has been capital in nature, but we've kind of looked at it and gone, actually, probably best practices now to move it, like Clinic World is moving to more subscription models. I mean, I know there's a 0.25 this year, which, in a perfect world you wouldn't pass on, but actually probably best practices as you do. What do you think, Peter, we need to just see what you think about this. What do you think will happen in terms of the control over our IT budgets going forward? I guess we put a lot of discipline on our OpEx as opposed to some of our CapEx. Can you just talk us through that? Because I think it's important for everyone to understand.
That's a good question. Councillor McDonald, look, I think generally we would say that moving it to operational expenditure will have positive benefits. I think that the nature of OpEx means that you have, in a way, much more, you have a lot tighter control and a lot more direct visibility over what is occurring. And so I think what you will see is that this will be beneficial, I guess, because in some respects, if you take, by way of example, if we do it as capital, often what happens, and Paul may speak to this later, not all the projects are completed, capital is carried forward. That won't happen and doesn't happen nearly as regularly in an operational environment where the expenditure is operational. You simply have to say, here are the services that will absolutely be delivered. This is what we rate for, this is what we collect. So I think in that regard, it does change the mindset a little bit about it going from being a capital item, and that can be carried forward to this is operational expenditure. We only will allocate what is absolutely needed. And while we seek to do that capital, I think when it's operational, there are better processes and systems inside council to manage that.
So at a really basic level, 10 years ago, I was buying an accounting system. I'd buy MYOB for $2,000, but now I pay $30 a month. That's effectively, that's the nature of the issue.
Yeah. Yes, or in another way, you pay for Netflix on a monthly basis, and that's what we buy. We are purchasing a lot more as a subscription to a service that is hosted by another provider. And that really is the nub of the issue, that no longer do we own control of this asset. We purchase that service the way someone purchases Netflix or whatever on a monthly basis.
So it's almost a product of the consensus, but it's a product in times in terms of just the way technology has moved.
Yes.
And we're saying, am I right in sort of thinking that initially it probably wasn't material for what it is, but now, good practice in terms of the team have just been reviewing stuff and gone, actually, going forward, we should be doing this in a better way.
Yeah, I think that's right. If we look, there's a thing called GAT, which is generally accepted accounting practice, riveting reading for a lot of people. But that under the accounting rules, that's the requirement for us to look at whether we own control the an asset. If we don't, then that becomes operational expenditure. And so that is really the driver for the accounting treatment of this expenditure is telling us that we need to treat it as operational.
Cool. Thank you. Sure.
If we move down systems, what we will have moved down systems to the service model rather than the capital model within kind of the next year, would we have to treat it as OPEX anyway? Like, wouldn't the auditor go, actually, how can you still treat this as capital? Like, you know, can you phase this in? Like, if you've actually switched it.
For you, Your Worship. So the accounting treatment of it will be treated as operational expenditure. And so we will do that immediately. That will have, so that's what will happen. So instead of creating an asset, we will create operational expenditure. Now, it doesn't have a material impact inside the P&L of council, the profit and loss accounts of council, because actually we're reversing out the depreciation that is charged against that asset, because software not lasting long gets depreciated pretty quickly. We're reversing that out and putting in the operational expenditure, and they get off within, you know, they're one down 20.9, the other's 20.21 million. They're very, very close. So those two net off. What we're talking about here is how we fund that expenditure. So the accounting treatment is to treat it as operational.
Yeah.
Here we're talking about the funding of it rather than borrow for it. It's collected through rates.
Okay, and because I was going to say, you know, following from that then is the whole, how could we consult on that, for example, like we're not going to be consulting on whether we move to software as a service, because we're doing that. You know, we haven't consulted on whether we do that. So you're saying that the only thing we would be able to consult on, and because we can't consult on whether we treat it as OPEX or CAPEX, because that's, we need to treat it as OPEX.
Yes.
But it's just we haven't consulted on how long we bring it in over.
Well, that's a really, through you, that's actually a really good question, Councillor. And there is a challenge, and we don't, for instance, consult on a whole range of things like insurance expenditure and all of that. The only mechanism would be rather than through our revenue financing policy. But at the moment, that our revenue and financing policy says we don't borrow for operational expenditure, so we have to address this issue here. So consulting on it would be through an indirect route, really, and it would be quite complicated.
So we're not really going to consult, we're just going to say in our next annual, in our financial overview that that's what we're doing. Yeah, okay.
That's it, that's so much. Yeah, just the jump of influence and media rate directly of 2%. So what's the cost difference to the council here?
Your worship, yeah. So the cost difference in terms of the services we're buying, purchasing and digital is nothing. This is just how we fund it. So we've already funded this expenditure, but in the long-term plan, we've funded it by borrowing. We've now gone and identified that it should be funded by rate. So the same suite of services will be purchased. That's just how we're funding it.
Right. Okay.
Is that how I make it?
Yeah. That makes some connection.
Yeah. The only question for me was around what are other councils building in the space, and are they facing the same issues at the moment?
Through you again, there's a paper coming to finance which touches on this. So other councils are moving to the cloud, doing software as a service, and they're treating it as operational expenditure. There are, just to elaborate briefly if I can on Councillor McDonald's questions, there are quite good advantages on moving to cloud, on happen and whatnot. The Treasury also released a paper to the government agencies back in 2021 saying if you're moving more software to the cloud and it's becoming a service, then this is how the accounting treatment of it should flow. So we're really getting into it.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you very much.
That's cool. All right, any more questions? Then you can answer the direction from this. That one, the 0.25. Yeah, that's sorry.
Yeah, well, no, just something that does help. If you saw out over 10 years, what you'll see is that the interest and borrowing costs, of course, that we have been borrowing for are no longer heavily funded. So there is an offset that grows out over those 10 years. I appreciate that. Right.
Okay. Okay.
The next slide.
You're assuming then that going out further, the impact will be less, or is it 0 for 28, 29? What's modelling look like?
It's a bit like through you, so it's a bit like energy. We'll always have to have expenditure in there, or insurance will always have to have money in there. What you would see though is you'd go out and we could show you, but what you'd see is that because we previously had budgeted to borrow for it, what you see as you go out is that those funding costs are not required, so your interest and principal repayments reduce over time. That's what you'd see as an offset.
The prices out there, thanks.
Can I check all the time, because you said 10 years out, but this slide says out to 32. So where's your modelling gone out to?
Oh, sorry, that was through you, Your Worship. That was in the LTP 24 to 30.
So we're baking in the phase and rating.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but I wanted to know how you do take on these subscriptions, because I sense that there's a bit of a jumpy to be able to go in and out if there is significant advantage with another. How long does subscriptions last, and is there any cost benefits to council over?
Yeah. Discussion for F&P. We have the digital. This is more of a funding decision rather than a.
Okay, I'll keep that up.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, the next slide is about funding for renewals, rating for renewals, and I just want to stress it's in our slide. This is not about the amount of renewals we do, the amount of pipes or bitumen. It's about how it's funded, whether we borrow for it or rate for it. So, but I'll let Bruce move through the slide.
Yes, we're good with the proposed 26 numbers up there to 5 years. So this is the amount of renewals for 353 million. So that doesn't change when we discuss rating for renewals. The question is, are we rating for them? See the second segment there breaks that down. There is some NZTA funding that's applying to our renewals, and we rate for a certain amount of renewals, and therefore there's a balance that we borrow for. And that's the difference between rating renewals.
Things that I mean, I think it would be easy to try and make the same. I think that's just that when we have these conversations with the community about long-term versus short-term benefits when it comes to rates, and we actually ask them those questions, that they do understand the benefit of a small increase now to save costs over time. And I think that it's really heartening to see. So.
This one, I mean, it's probably more of a debate to make the control things, but people to not make it up. But to actually debate it all the time. I think it's about the board. Debate all the other ones today. making that increase. Exactly.
You can still debate on the table. Yeah.
Where are we at? There are questions on this one.
Budget for a number of projects, so that's why I think it'd be fine.
So what are they telling? You haven't paid there yet.
The field of the seats to be to make it.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Okay, the general feeling around this is what the 125.
Yeah, debate on that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just,
yeah, sorry. Yep.
it's the irony of sitting around a table where people can easily say just bake it in or not, when the majority of their ratepayers might pay half the amount of rate to the others. I mean, I know it's the system we have, but it's so easy to say bake something in when your ratepayers pay $1,400 a year rather than 50,000 a year. I mean, it's fine to keep putting things up if you're going to put up the UAGC and even things out a bit more, but
It's pretty similar to yours.
One at a time, otherwise we'll stuff up the.
It's not fair to say it's easy.
Talk about election year.
oh, no, that's just the point. And I think just saying just bake it in isn't so easy, because in some areas this is only $1,000, and other areas it's hundreds.
That saves everyone money over time now. It saves everybody money over time.
Sorry,
Back it up.
Yeah. Sounds so.
One at a time. Okay, so Aaron said, is bit any more, Sarah?
Just one of those things is, like we've seen with the other things that we ask specific questions on, the questions that have come back with good community support are ones that we have baked in and that we will debate on the day. Seems to be the pattern that we've seen today. And this one, like the Air Force Museum and others, has good community support, and that's why people are looking at making it in as a weird term, right? It's and it didn't come from necessarily us. It's just that include it in the document that comes to council on the day, based on the community support, and then we'll debate it.
Yeah, but I totally dispute the term good community support when 1/4 of 1% of the population is definitely on.
You didn't raise that though, the Air Force Museum.
No, and that's probably.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone's here. Everyone's okay. Good. It's good to spot that.
Yeah, that's it.
Samuel?
I'll leave it for the day, but
Okay. Any more questions? So, yes.
My question is to Sam, who is an accountant, to what would his position be? That why would he, as an accountant, be going, we should put it out rather than put it up? If it's going to be, if the other feeling at the table is, well, it's cheaper in the long run, why?
Feeling it's bad.
yeah, I mean, I guess we've baked in a 0.5% increase today off something beyond our control and something we do have control of. My preference would be to spread that over a period of time to leave money with people now, but that'll be no surprise, for anyone. And then we just make annual choices as a council around what we can save money on. But I guess the fear I've got now is that I feel pretty strongly about this, and I'd hate for it to tip an annual plan over. If people are wanting to bake it in, but they're not supporting the annual plan on the day, which would concern me, because I'm just looking at how the draft one went, with people that want to bake it in didn't support the draft plan. We may now get to a situation where the people that want to bake it in still don't support the annual plan, and then we live for a line. So you may not have enough people to get an annual plan over the line. I'm just waiting it here, but it's like, as long as the people that want to add the increase now are prepared to see the annual plan through, we're fine. But we have a big problem if they're not prepared to follow it through. Yeah,
it's very good. But it's also from preach to the nation. So how do we know?
Yeah.
Well, but I guess the irony without being direct is, take yourself, didn't support the draft, but they're happy to put 0.25 on. So you'll increase it, but may not.
And I'm happy with other parts of.
Yep, that's
That's the position that you've taken.
So we've got the support. That's all I'm flagging, is that if the people that want to increase it now are not prepared to carry the annual plan through in 3 or 4 weeks, we may have a problem as a council, and I'm just signalling it because I've seen it play out. Yeah,
I'll support whatever.
It's a fair point.
It's up to the point what the difference implemented in the short term, but we don't in comparison to the long. So, can you just over 10 years on the line of the LTP, what is the difference between waiting for renewals versus borrowing? What's the net impact in terms of cost?
We did have that too.
That was in the consultation.
Today.
Yeah.
Or is it in the consultation document, isn't it?
It'll be in the report.
That'll be done.
Peter, way back in the day, we did all use for a lot because after the earthquake, we were short of tin that we picked off the right in that one, not quite.
Yes, correct.
Is that what that's why we're where we are? Like,
Besides Gunny.
And we have a financial strategy which calls out for us to be increasing it over time, and we've deferred that for the last kind of 4 years because of the pandemic and other things. So we do need to start getting back to that financial strategy.
Celeste, you have a question?
Deferring to my colleague Gunny on that.
Look, we deferred doing renewals on the basis that the skirt repairs would renew all of our infrastructure, and that's what we thought we were getting when we didn't move government. But what we got was patch repairs, not renewals. And so now what we've done is we've got a combination of having deferred for a very long time renewals and also having to fix the patch repairs that didn't bring the road up to a standard that would last longer than a couple of years.
Ben's got it right in front of you.
So, just also a point of clarification, it's not deferring the renewals, councillor, it's how we fund those renewals that we talked about.
After the earthquake, I deferred doing renewals. It's just keep
yeah, so, and I'm not sure if we feel hooked up, but the this in 2051, the interest saving is $1.6 million, and the debt repayments avoided, I guess you'd say, is 1 million. So the overall saving is 2.6 million from down to 2031. It's on page 53 of the LTP. Sorry, the consultation document. Now there is one that also shows what it is down to 61, and that is the borrowing time.
Yeah.
That one is 9.3 million saved, and the repayment for it is 12 million. So the overall saving is 21.3. But that, going out to these contracts, just be aware that there's a lot of assumption going on. Some contract
I did not expect I'll be here in 2061. Yeah. Okay. So what next week?
Right, in your strong focus on capital program deliverability. Since the LTP was signed off, there has been some questions from councillors about deliverability of the program. We'll brief you a week or two ago on a proposal to rephase, not to rephase some capital to reach more deliverable figure for the coming year. He's now going to re-brief you on that proposal and seek guidance on what we do with the annual plan document.
So in the deliverability discussion, we recommended that we reduce the capital program by 71.5 million as part of the deliverability issue. A lot of that was to actually move the budgets around, not necessarily the projects. And what I mean by that is that when a project finishes, that doesn't mean it's the end of the funding part of it. You frequently pay 2 to 3 or more months after the final part of the work is complete. You don't actually, it's not like going to the shop and just paying for it direct. There's a whole contract process to go on after. So a lot of projects, the actual funding lasts a lot longer than the project itself in terms of when we're actually spending and paying for that work to be completed. So what we're talking about here is a lot of this, when we're moving the budget around, is we're moving the funding, not necessarily the delivery of the project. So I just want to make that differentiation to be clear that it's not always that we're just shipping the project out, we're shipping where the funding sits alongside that project.
So what you're saying is contracts that I used to be involved with sort of thing. Sometimes it's 10% retention, the job's finished, you, whoever, hangs on to 10%, sometimes a year.
Sometimes two even.
Yes, it depends if it's land and flat. And that's the carry on of that little tail.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a funding part of it. It goes on quite a bit longer than the project itself.
Yep.
And so a lot of what we're talking about here in terms of this rephasing of the 71 million was more about where the funding sits and the project sits and making sure that they line up as much as we know today. Obviously that could change over time. That's the nature of capital projects, but yeah, that's what we're doing. So really we're just looking at, do you support the deferral of the funding of that 71.5 from the capital program going forward? Now this does not include approximately 20 million we just talked about a little bit earlier today on the capital for digital. That would be on top. So it's approximately 20 million that would then drop out of this as well on top of. So that would be making 91.5 approximately dropping out of the capital program for next year.
Sarah, please. Then
Thanks. When it comes to deliverability, and it's just hard looking between what's in the other plan from the 29th and here, the deliverability of our water main renewals program. So we've put additional funding in for this year. So in this current financial year, we had an extra $1 million for doing the planning to increase the renewals. We've got an extra 10 million for next year and then more money the following year. And we're confident that we can deliver those renewals.
The renewals, definitely yes, we think that they'll be fine to be delivered. Yes, we've been ramping up this year to be able to deliver that work going forward. So yes, and it's work that we do on a regular basis, so we should be comfortable that we can deliver that.
Yeah. And when we decided on the long-term plan, the reason we didn't put the extra money on then was because of that audit process, but we still could have delivered more than we had originally budgeted for because we're putting the extra 10 million now, so we clearly could have.
I mean, we're still yes and no. Yes, I mean, in that specific area, probably yes.
Yeah,
it's area by area. It's not what we're not going to deliver about $50 million for this year's program, ultimately, but it's not in that area.
But it's on that area, yeah. So sometimes I get questions about the deliverability of water main renewals. That's not an issue for us. No.
Pipe renewals generally are not an issue for us. So.
Great.
Thank you for this conversation. You've just explained to us about the funding as a component of delivery.
Yes.
It's the first time I've heard that. That's the first piece of it. I haven't figured that. I haven't joined the dots on that bit before. So my question then is this something that you've just joined the dots on, or have you always looked at it from a funding perspective as opposed to what we would think of as a physical delivery? And in the past, when you've looked at your capital delivery forecast, have you always looked at funding, or is it something that you guys have just had an aha moment about?
Always looked at it from a funding point of view. It was just from
You've been explained to us on that.
Things that I've had back since the deliverability and some questions that we've had as a consequence of that last workshop was why I've reiterated it today, because I think people will not hear that there is a slight difference between the delivery of a project and when you pay for it.
Thank you for that. I had joined the dots on that bit. So nothing changes to the advice or the review that you have done. We've spoken about it's just
the same. It was just trying to be clearer with everyone with how it works, because there was the comments we've received back and feedback stuff that seemed to be some confusion around that fact that the project was to be delivered on this day, but you've got funding out past that. And we've got funding.
Thank you very much.
And as you quite rightly said, sometimes it goes 2 years because landscaping, we now ask the person who put it in to make sure the trees are growing.
Yes.
and that's something that wasn't there in the past, so we've got a hell of a lot of extra work. Okay.
Hand up.
Yeah, we've got one. Celeste.
Look out, yeah, to answer the proper question, but it's specific. I know we touched on this, and there is, you know, it's explained, but I'm not still satisfied with some of those specific projects being reclaimed because of, I think that project a bit premature. So, with regards to the process, if in principle we agree, but there are concerns about whether it's, because it could also be the optics of something bad.
I know that the project you're talking about is South Shore, yes. Yeah. Now, currently, the forecast for delivery of that project, the civil work, is April 2020. That is provided there's a number of factors that we get across the line for them, which includes getting the consent and getting that sorted. There are no additional requirements of consent in terms of what might be in terms of redesign of that work if we have to, depending on how that pans out in terms of the consent and granting of the consent. We've assumed that it's a 12-month bill. We have time to market. We don't know who is going to agree with the 12-month bill or not. So there's still a lot of risk on that project in terms of time. So even if we only need to lose a month, April, May, June is the end of the year, 2 months, it could easily. Our planting is not April, our actual planting is later than that, so our planting actually goes into the 28 year anyway. So the project's not finished until 2028, technically.
Without going specific to that project, because it's something that's quite hard to comment on publicly because obviously we're going for public notification, it's low public interest around that. Also a lot of concern within the community. I just think it has to be handled quite carefully. Any reflagging, whatever reason of that budget, because the last memo we got to the community board was quite a different timeline. So
I'm reading this off that memo went to community board. This is it. And it clearly says April 27 was the civil completion of the civil works, but there were a lot of assumptions, and they were clearly outlined ultimately picking up winter, preceding year of the work. So there's a lot of information in that memo that raises a lot of risk for the project.
For sure. So I guess what I appreciate your level of detail. I think it's more around the optics and the public perception. So I'm just like that is potential concern because council might say we're rephasing a project, and the community might say we don't care what the specifics are for that. It looks like it's being delayed. So we just have to make sure that that's communicated very carefully. Yeah. People might not see that as like you can tell. Yeah. So just like that.
Last thing, the changes.
Tyler. Good guys, really quickly. Could you just quickly talk to us about what the core and non-core
from the original deliverability, we talked about 9 projects that we sort of said were sort of non-core, which are projects that weren't really part of our day-to-day delivery.
Okay, so
that's separated them out and said the part of the reason there was an increase in the total program going forward was these 9 projects that we sort of are delivering. They're a bit more ad hoc than normal BAU work. And so we just sort of said that's part of the reason, and we're delivering things like the Activated Sludge, Akaroa wastewater, because those projects that were sort of over and above our normal core business. So we're just separating that. That's what it's really just to help understand why the program was going up.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Tyrone, the event.
So I'm just still can't quite understand how we can budget in a capital program of 572 million next year versus I mean, we're only at 500 million for this year. Like, how do we pull the magic 15% increase out of our behinds? Like, I just don't get it. You just can't increase a capital program 15% year on year with the best will in the world, unless you just believe that supply chains don't exist.
But we're not looking to increase it 15% year on year. It's something that we top out in 2027 is our capital. Yes, we have an increase in next year after. But the other factor is that we've got more and more assets that we have to keep renewing. And so part of that equation is we've got to grow our program to some degree to be able to keep up with what we're doing in renewables, because otherwise we'll get behind and we'll create another problem elsewhere.
Oh, no, I appreciate that we have to grow our program. My assertion is that we can't, because we just cannot eat more market share than we've got without doing something drastically different. But anyway, look, I've said my piece. I mean, these are my feelings on it, and yeah, I'm going to argue the toss over it forever.
Yeah.
So, the cheaper route, because some of the projects that you're proposing to defer is money that I don't believe actually to spend. So it would be good to know. It's not fine. You are moving budget.
Yeah. Yes, there's particularly 5 projects in the transport space that we're moving out based on Kiwi Rail stuff. 5.
Yeah, so that's different. Or delay, retiming, rephasing. So actually, we don't need to spend some of this money. So this when we come to the debate and the decision making, I will be moving amendments to reduce those Kiwi Rail budgets. So I just want to flag that, like, we don't need to spend 7 million on Scotland's Road crossing. If we're going to push it out, then actually I'd rather reduce the funding. We can have something on, but I don't think we need that much. So I just want to be really clear, we get the advice that we should also be getting advice on options to reduce the expenditure, not just rephase it. Is that able to be done?
It's briefing going to be, we'll see in the next couple of weeks, which will then flow through into full council, the outcome of that, which is around February.
Right.
Feedback required.
And some of those projects were funded through deferring other projects. So have you considered reinstating the budgets that were taken on those other projects? Like cycle projects were had their funding cut or substituted or rephased to pay for the Scotland's Road crossing. And now that we're facing the Scotland's Road crossing, have you thought about actually reinstating the projects that suffered as a result of that funding on budget?
Well, the program that's been presented is what we think can be done for next year.
So some of those decisions.
Yeah. And just to specifics, the planted road bridge. I mean, I just do not support putting that money into I'm just really confused on what's happening with that project. Like, is it delayed? Is it on track? What do we need to do to keep that going rather than deferring it?
So, Peters Road Bridge, very briefly, we provided you an update on this regular update. As we've discussed before, the business case process is rolling through the NPTA process right now, and from that, there will be a design and consenting process before we can start construction. That is all on track at the moment, and it is continuing to be on track. So we have looked at the budgets. Ultimately, we will not know exactly when we need to spend the money until we have a contractor on site and we are starting construction. So we have made a realistic assessment of where the budget is, or the budget is still there and available. It doesn't mean the project is slowing down.
On that slide, we're told that the total is 10. I'm not sure the figure right. It says the total is 10 is 0, and we've replaced 10 million, but it's a much greater project. So what you're saying
so that's only the change.
The cost of the change to the program is 0.
Yes.
So
all the money is gone budget.
Right. And so in terms of yeah, so that's the 63 million that we've got for all projects. So we're still spending. I find it a bit confusing not having the change columns at the same time as the individual change. So like the 10 million for Painted Road comes out from
just that'll explain to you.
Well, I think it's kind of like in terms of Select's point, like the community need to know what's happening. So I mean, I'm going to make the stuff, but just
useful. I think
Nothing has stopped.
it's just that we've got two different line items, and we don't have a line item showing the total impact of the change.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think it would be useful later just to have that thing, because it is. I mean, I don't support deferring Pages Road Bridge. So, yeah.
Thank you. Celeste, let's hear it.
I understand that the bridge itself and the approach, the two key approaches are part of the business case, but there's a lot that falls outside of that work that we don't seem to have a timeline on. I understand that these kind of some of that work is, but some of those roads are now recommended by. And what I'm curious to know is if we're pushing out that we're also not planning to do work on those ancillary parts of the program. Okay. So is there visibility of that? So is the budget broken out into the main project and ancillary books, or is it only one budget line?
That's multiple budget lines.
So there's two.
I think there's one.
Okay, that's some clarification. Thank you.
Okay, right. Sorry, that was before Sarah. Sorry. Yeah.
Jumping back to what I wrote as when we received your report about the capital program and saying, for example, saying we're 80% of what we said we were going to be at, does that mean you've spent 80% of the funding in the budget, or does it mean that we physically delivered 80% of what we said we were going to deliver and complete?
Two different parts of that report. One is the dollars, and one is what we have delivered in terms of milestones, which is physical delivery. So that we're delivering over about 92, 93%, I think, at the moment in terms of spend, and about 85% in terms of delivery.
So, going back to what Tyrone was raising, is there an issue about supply chain and the availability of human capital to physically do the works? Is there anything that you're concerned about in that space? So, yes, we need to increase our program to keep up with the assets that we've got. Do you have any concerns about supply chain to deliver those works and the availability of human capital to do the works that we say we're going to do?
Generally, no. From a contract point of view,
no, and I actually am meeting with one of the contractors this morning, and there is capacity in the market. We still get multiple tenders in the tender box, so no, we don't have a capacity issue. Not from a construction perspective.
Thank you.
Okay. It's definitely not. Sorry, there's definitely not a capacity concern in the consulting market at the moment.
Thank you.
really got to start moving along and watch people. Okay. We've got Sarah and Sam, and then that will probably.
Yeah, so it's just another one for Lydia or might be the others. What back to pages over Bridget, but it's not on the project delivery and things. What are we currently budgeting in as income from Waka Kotahi? Do we budget in just the stuff that's been not confirmed but in the probable, or do we budget in a longer set over time? There's just out in the community, there's a lot of confusion about the revenue that's been allocated.
The confusion is exacerbated by the fact that the announcement was related to the revenue that would be allocated for this triennium. When the business case goes in, the complete. We are looking to ask for a decision on what they call it pre-implementation and implementation. We call it design and construction. So that we're asking for that whole complete package. So we have factored in, and because that time period goes over this triennium, we have help budget for the probable, total probable amount for the bridge and the approaches.
Okay.
But not the ancillary approaches. That's what the business case is about.
So in the 3 years of the NLTF,
there was 11 million or something
total, half of which was ours. So the government's done $6.5 million so far of probable funding, plus some planning. Yeah, but we're probably going to get more in the next NLTF.
Yeah, if the business case is approved, then we expect that we know if there is a need for the whole.
The government haven't currently given us 13 million.
We're working through that process.
The allocated 6.5 currently.
And NZTA always does that. Their announcements are always a total project cost, which includes local share.
Sam?
Yeah, sorry, and I may have got this wrong, because I think this is really good. Just correct me if I'm wrong. All we've done is said, this is the capital budget at the beginning of the year. You've gone away and said, this is the stuff we can practically achieve within the year, and you've replaced it to that amount, haven't you?
Yes. So we've looked at the projects and when we can physically deliver them and therefore pay for them. That's what we've rejigged based on current delivery estimates.
So basically so the other way to look at it is if we didn't change the budget, we'd like to get to the end of the year and be in exactly the same situation as the budget you've set now.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Great. Okay. So we've got two questions here. Now, we're going to be careful that these are on what the guys are talking about, proposed capital rephasing. We don't want to get into the design of the Pates Road Bridge. So it's Lester's first and then
Yeah.
So, I mean, just some feedback. I cannot believe we're deferring the capital acceleration. All the funding projects that we should be bringing forward, not pushing out, it should be the capital acceleration. So I'm just like gobsmacked that a fund that was supposed to help us accelerate work has ended up taking so long to deliver. I know there's reasons for that, but I'd like to see how we can actually spend that money and get those projects done than pushing it out another year, which is that's all.
good comment. Right. You're good? Did you want to answer it? No, I didn't. I don't think you did. So, do you agree with the proposed 71? I certainly do. I think we're hearing around the place we are, except for a couple. So,
I don't agree with it, but that's fine if there's consensus. But I'll go on record saying that.
Yeah, there's another 20 as well, so it's 91 all right, so that'll help your cause.
What's the 20?
IT.
Okay, so that's guidance on the CD questions and the community feedback. Thank you. That's the core of the annual plan. That also covers the software renewals and capital rephasing. With your permission, Mr. Mayor, we might take a couple of minutes to come back to you with where the rates currently stand based on the guidance. And then there are a few other items to discuss around surplus growth and so on. But that's the core part dealt with. We'll come back to you with the number very shortly. Is that okay?
10 minutes.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's time for people that were asking earlier about time. At this rate, we're probably aiming to finish by midday.
Okay. So just before Tell you some very good news that has taken years, almost probably a decade. It's come to my attention that Jimmy Chen is out on the now newly opened Horsewell Junction railway crossing right now. That happened, and he's dancing. It's taken a bloody long time, but thank goodness it's done. So everyone that's listening, go out and drive over.
Mike Moore's out there doing his Elvis impersonation.
Yeah, he's doing Aaron out of the job. Please do. Far away, please.
Okay. That's all the guidance from this morning. Is what will build the documents around the annual plan. I think it's really Bruce talked to now. 7.8 to 7.77.
So it's what seems at the moment. Yes, I've got that slightly below 10 at the moment, and through you about 9%. That slide up is the first slide on Monday, so you can see that there are a couple of other things to discuss on Monday around 20.
Okay.
Off that, have you done the total rate increase across the 3 years, the difference between the two? With the 3-year trend. I guess we can just add it up and again. No, you've got the current and what at the post drafting on that 19th May.
Here I'm
So next slide, please.
Just ask a question to follow up. Going back to the slide. With the rating. You could phase it out over a slightly longer time to reduce that impact. Would we get a response to that?
We can number it.
So digital.
Yes.
So we'll come back on that.
It's not, we just go away and do that.
That's not this one. It's the city. Jump before you go through. It's a cost operation. Seems quite bright for that matter.
If you're running it. Sure. Please.
Next slide, please. Next again.
So on that, we'd like to just cover the latest rating growth. Our story some positive leverage. We've also got the operating surplus and introduction and we bring some inflation to around some risk to actual cost estimates around the exponential weather event. That's what we envisaged, I think.
Yes, that's my other council. Anything else you want to add? Okay, could you move forward, please? There's a slight adjustment here. It's just a clarification of wording. It was a simplification away from what was actually a little bit convoluted. It's just clarifying the wording. It doesn't change the numbers. So we're just keeping you advised of a simplification, that's all. It's just a transparency thing. Is that okay, Tom?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and that brings us to next steps. We have 2 workshops left, Monday and Tuesday. As Bruce said, there's a couple of focus numbers to be discussed and how you'd like them treated on top of the 7.77. Those are not long sessions, they're not 4 days. So, but between them, I think they're roughly half a day each. So we have a bit of work, a bit of time on our sleeves to get that last bit done. And then after that, we're into build the documentation, report it risk, and preparation for the adoption meeting on the 24th.
Thank you. Can we get at one of those bit of a breakdown on how we're treating Te Kaha? And I know that the CapEx is all there and for the build staff, but the Te Kaha Limited, who are tasked with building it and currently are kind of in charge, they'll be winding up when it opens in April, and so that ownership structure and how we're treating that within the budget and stuff as well, it's really important. Like we've got the BO forecasts, but we need to look at how the ownership structure goes and the various tax advantages and disadvantages of different ownership structures. Yeah, and what that means for the best for city as opposed to yeah.
Yeah, more than comfortable through you, Your Worship. Yes, I think there's a piece of work there, and Andrew and I have discussed it. I'm not sure we'd be able to bring that in time for we can bring some of these things, but in terms of a complete package of it, I think we'd need a bit more time, but we want to get
we have initially some information on how we're treating it currently, because that changeover happens within the life of this annual plan and does have a financial implication. So it's good to know how we're currently treating it, and then like something on what our options are to make it better. Like
yes, we can look at what we can bring back, because we have got some modelling in our budget for that, so we can certainly show.
The assumptions we're currently making.
Yes.
In the decision making, because we need to make a decision on ownership structures and all that kind of stuff before it opens clearly, and all of that. And I'm assuming that comes to council as a decision paper with all the information on the broken ones.
Isn't that the one that we talked about on Tuesday?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Like just knowing what assumptions were being made within this financial year is important too. Yeah.
But the other thing, which I'm sure you cover in the paper, is that unless I've got it out the company delivering it and just delivering it.
Yeah. But because they're winding up, we need to know what's happening next.
That might be why it's a bit like, I won't necessarily wind up straight away, given defects and all that kind of stuff. So it'd just be it's a normal capital program build, with a different governance structure delivering it.
Yeah. I just want to know how we're treating it.
We don't need to. Just wanted to refer back to the fees. Are there any other fees under review? A surplus work, for example, sport and rec. That's contains the fee.
In the
Not and regulatory.
Okay, that's what you can have some questions around building inspectors, not for the wording, it's more around next
Sorry, aren't they just cost neutral? The fees for inspections at the cost?
They pay for the costs, yes, fees recovery.
That's a consultant I'm worried about. But that's not mine.
Right.
Thank you. We had an information session scheduled this week on new footpath program, but that's been pushed back to 10 June. And I'm just worried that it'll be too late to help inform an annual plan.
Sorry. The first year it's a prioritisation, the second year there's $1 million on budget. So 2 years is it's a program that's in running and it's not supposed to change as part of this single plan.
So but we don't know what's in this or what's being done over this next year.
No, that hasn't been done, but
So, but
budget was looking for next year, does that really change?
this year, 25, 26.
And next year, and the year after, and the
So, yeah, but I'm keen to know what's in it to help inform an annual plan. So for yeah, but also like if when we've got new subdivisions being built, and then there might be that it costs you agreeing at the same time as the cheapest way. Contractors and developers already on site, actually some extra budget means they can do this at the same time. So I'm keen to understand that there's enough on budget to help do those things.
Guys, well, I'll come back to you. Well, if it's impacting it, it's usually not impacting
but yeah,
cost share agreements and those other agreements.
The information is not going to impact anything. Yeah, I'm just really keen to see that information rather than it being too late to
Just want to know where it's heading.
You'll
yeah.
we'll sort that out.
Thank you.
Yanni.
So, like, we could raise about $50 million if we sold seats at the new stadium. So I'm just wondering, like, you know, like, what's the process? Yeah, like 2,000. You know, if you $1,000 a seat, maybe 50 years. So very common overseas when people build stadiums that people contribute. So the court theatre has been selling seats, you know, I think for about $1,500 a seat. So I'm just wondering, like, how do we progress these ideas that we have to raise revenue to offset the biggest capital cost that we're facing, which is the stadium? Like,
Stage. So if it was to make a decision like that and put in review, you have got sufficient information about to progress that outside the plan.
we've been raising it for, or some of us have been raising for over 2 years. Since we made the decision to approve the budget, we've continuously asked for things to be looked at in terms of the way we raise capital, but we only seem to get operational responses around costs.
Timing for that outside this meeting, since it's not an end of that.
Right.
Just be very clear, very helpful. Thank you. Very good.
Thank you. That's us. Thank you very much for coming out to our new meeting space. And just to carry on right over the Water Junction Road.
Dodge,
Other question.
I just wanted to just acknowledge the work that started for getting us
Absolutely.
into a temporary location or transitional. So
Couldn't build it out. Good on you. Thank you very much, guys.